right, everybody, welcome. Tuesday evening here. Fox 10 News Now. We are here with you, seeing a beautiful skyline shot of New York City. Pretty soon, before you know it, that ball will be dropping in Times Square. Love to see that happen every year. It's such a great tradition that they have, and it really helps you bring in the new year. Even if you don't go there, you just watch it on TV, you really can celebrate with all the New Yorkers. Okay, folks, I do want to show you that Ted Cruz event that I did promise you. We will get to that momentarily. How about right now?
Oh, is that not right? Oh, sorry. Look, if there's one thing about Nashville, y'all can sing. I'm thrilled to be here with you. So how many of y'all watched the Republican debate last week? How incredible is it to have so many young, talented, dynamic Republican candidates for president? Contrast with the Democrats. You know, I'm pretty sure the first Democratic debate consisted of Hillary and the Chipotle clerk. Well, no, actually, that's not fair. That's not fair. We can't forget about Bernie Sanders. So now the Republican field consists of a wild-eyed socialist with ideas that are dangerous for America and the world, and Bernie Sanders. And has anyone noticed the Democratic debates? They keep scheduling them at like 2 in the morning on Saturday, and they air them on Alaska PBS? It's almost like they don't want anyone to know who's running. But you know, there is good news. The good news is they've announced the venue of the next Democratic debate. They're holding it at Leavenworth. Well, they wanted to make it easier for Hillary to attend. You know, all of us are here today because our country's in crisis. This is not a typical time in politics.
Very interesting. This is certainly
we are bankrupting our kids and grandkids. Our constitutional rights are under assault each and every day. And America has receded from leadership in the world, and it has made the world a much more dangerous place. And yet I am here this afternoon with a word of hope and encouragement and exhortation. All across the state of Tennessee and all across the country, people are waking up, and there is a spirit of revival that is sweeping this nation. And I am here to tell you today, help is on the way. So I want to ask everyone here to look forward. Look forward to January 2017. If I am elected president, If and when. Let me tell you what I intend to do on the first day in office. The first thing I intend to do is rescind every single illegal and unconstitutional executive action this president likes to say he's got a phone and he's got a pen. Well, you live by the pen, you die by the pen. And my pen has got an eraser. By the way, we saw in a nearby state, the Commonwealth of Virginia, the Democratic Attorney General of Virginia announced today he is canceling Second Amendment reciprocity for Virginia. You want to underscore, listen, there are consequences when you elect Democrats to power, and friends don't let friends vote Democrat. Because when they get in power, they come and try to take your guns. But you look at Washington, sadly, the corruption, it hadn't been limited just to the White House. It is extended across every federal agency in the government. The second thing I intend to do on the first day in office is instruct the United States Department of Justice to open an investigation into Planned Parenthood and these horrible videos. The administration of justice should be blind to party or ideology. The only fidelity of the Department of Justice should be to the laws and the Constitution of the United States. The third thing I intend to do on the first day in office is instruct the Department of Justice and the IRS and every other federal agency that the persecution of religious liberty ends today. That means that every serviceman and woman has the right to seek out and worship God Almighty with all of our hearts, minds, and souls, and their superior officer has nothing to say about it. That means that the Little Sisters of the Poor, a Catholic charity that right now the Obama administration is persecuting, the Little Sisters of the Poor will find that the case against them has been dismissed. The fourth thing, that may already have happened, in which case I'll bake her a cake. The fourth thing I intend to do on the first day in office is rip to shreds this catastrophic Iranian nuclear deal. The single greatest national security threat facing this country is the threat of a nuclear Iran. And we need a commander-in-chief who will stand up and say unequivocally, under no circumstances will we now allow the nation of Iran, led by a theocratic Ayatollah who chants death to America. Under no circumstances will Iran be allowed to acquire nuclear weapons. The fifth thing I intend to do on the first day in office is begin the process of moving the American embassy in Israel to Jerusalem, the once and eternal capital of Israel. presidential candidates who've made that same promise, both Democrats and Republicans. And yet, inevitably, when they get to office, they don't do it. And the reason is their team comes to them and they say, you know, if we do that, it's going to make other folks in the Middle East really, really unhappy with us. Well, if you hadn't noticed, they're already pretty unhappy with us. And the single biggest difference between me and the other very, very fine men and women standing on that debate stage is that with me, when I tell you I'm going to do something, I'm going to do exactly what I said I would do. So that's day one. There are 365 days in a year, 4 years in a presidential term, 4 years in a second term. By the end of 8 years, there are going to be a whole lot of reporters and newspaper editors and journalists that have checked themselves into therapy. In the days that follow, I will go to Congress and we will repeal every word of Obamacare. We're going to pass common sense health care reform that makes health insurance personal and portable and affordable and keeps government from getting in between us and our doctors. In the days that follow, I will instruct the U.S. Department of Education, which should be abolished. I will instruct the Department of Education that Common Core ends today. In the days that follow, we will finally secure the borders and end sanctuary cities. There are 360 jurisdictions in this country that have declared themselves sanctuary cities. Every one of them is going to find their federal funds cut off. We're going to build a wall that works. We're going to pass case law. And we are going to end welfare benefits for those here illegally. In the days that follow, we will rebuild the military. And we will honor the commitments made to our soldiers and sailors and airmen and Marines. We're going to revamp the VA so every veteran could choose his doctor. Also means we're going to protect every serviceman and woman's constitutional right to keep and bear arms. Sadly, the state of Tennessee has seen the tragic consequences of this administration's policies in that regard. And what that means is that the next time a jihadist shows up at a recruiting center in Chattanooga, he's going to encounter the business end of firearms wielded by a dozen Marines. We will have a commander-in-chief who makes clear to the world we will defeat radical Islamic terrorism. We'll have a president willing to utter the words radical Islamic terrorism. And we will not weaken, we will not degrade, we will utterly and completely destroy ISIS. Every militant on the face of the planet will understand if you go and join ISIS, if you wage jihad on the United States of America, if you attempt to murder innocent Americans, you are signing your death warrant. In the days that follow, we will take on the EPA. And the CFPB. And the alphabet soup of federal agencies that have descended like locusts on small businesses, killing jobs all across this country. You know, it's almost as if the Obama administration has declared as their anthem an old country western song, "You can take this job and shove it." I'm reminded a few years back, I was in West Texas, and I asked folks there, I said, what's the difference between regulators and locusts? I said, well, the thing is, you can't use pesticide on the regulators. This old West Texas farmer, he leaned back, said, want to bet? And in the days that follow, I will go to Congress, and we will pass fundamental tax reform. We will pass a simple flat tax. Where every American can fill out your taxes on a postcard. And when we do that, we should abolish the IRS. There are about 90,000 employees at the IRS. We need to padlock that building, take all 90,000 and put them down on our southern border. Now, to our friends in the media, I say that somewhat tongue-in-cheek. But you know, if you think about it, sir, imagine if you traveled thousands of miles in the blazing sun. You're swimming across the Rio Grande, and the first thing you see is 90,000 IRS agents. You turn around and go home too. Now, some of y'all may be thinking, all of this makes sense to me. It's basic common sense. Live within your means. Don't bankrupt our kids and grandkids. Follow the Constitution. But can we do it? Can it be done? You know, Scripture tells us there's nothing new under the sun. I think where we are today is very, very much like the late 1970s. The parallels with the Jimmy Carter administration are uncanny. Same failed economic policy. Same misery, stagnation, and malaise. The same feckless and naive foreign policy. In fact, the exact same countries, Russia and Iran, openly laughing at and mocking the President of the United States. Now, why is it that that analogy gives me so much hope and optimism? Because we know how that story ended. All across this country, millions of men and women arose up and became the Reagan Revolution. And it didn't come from Washington. Washington despised Ronald Reagan. By the way, if you see a candidate who Washington embraces, run and hide. It came from the American people, and it turned this country around. We went from stagnation and misery and malaise to booming economic growth, to millions lifted out of poverty into prosperity and the American dream. We went from our hostages languishing in Iran to winning the Cold War and tearing the Berlin Wall to the ground. Why am I so optimistic? Because the same thing is happening again. All across this country. You know, when we launched our campaign, March 23rd, at Liberty University, the New York Times promptly opined, Cruz cannot win. Because the Washington elites despise him. I kind of thought that was the whole point of the campaign. Listen, if you think things are going great in Washington, then we need to keep headed in the same basic direction, just kind of fiddle around the edges, then I ain't your guy. On the other hand, if you think Washington is fundamentally broken, that there is a bipartisan corruption of career politicians in both parties that get in bed with the lobbyists and special interests and grow and grow and grow government, and we need to take power out of Washington and back to we the people. That is what this campaign is all about. Tennessee is going to have a powerful voice in the Republican primary this year. This election cycle, it starts as it always does in the first 4 states: Iowa, New Hampshire, South Carolina, Nevada. We are all in those 4 states. We've got incredible teams on the ground in each of those first 4 states. But then, 10 days after South Carolina, boom, it's Super Tuesday. It's March 1st, the so-called SEC primary. It's Tennessee, Georgia, Alabama, Arkansas, Oklahoma, Texas. Now look, Tennessee and Texas. A whole lot of folks from Tennessee came and started Texas. And we agree on just about everything, except football. But let me tell you the role that the state of Tennessee is going to play. It is going to play a critical role, helping ensure that the next Republican nominee and the next President of the United States is a strong and proven conservative. We are building a grassroots army across Tennessee and across the country. And I ask every one of you to join us. Be part of that army from the people. If you're willing to join us and you have your cell phones with I ask you to take your cell phones out and text the word liberty to 41444. Once again, that's text the word liberty to 41444. That'll do two things. Number one, that'll sign you up to be part of our team, to be notified and mobilized on the ground here in Tennessee. But number two, that'll give you an opportunity right there on your phone to contribute to the campaign, to help ensure that we still have the resources to get out to America our positive, optimistic, conservative vision. That's how we turn the country around. Yeah. I want to close with this. You know, for all of us here, freedom is not some abstract concept we read about in a school book. Freedom is real. It's personal. In our families. You know, for me, I think about my dad. Y'all had a chance to hear from my father a few minutes ago. My dad was born and raised in Cuba. He grew up in Cuba. And as a kid, when he was a teenager, my father fought in the Cuban Revolution. And he was in prison. He was tortured by Batista's army. When my dad was 17, he was lying on the ground in a Cuban jail cell, covered in mud and blood and grime. His nose was broken. His teeth were shattered out of his mouth. And he remembers thinking, I don't have any kids. Nobody depends on me. It doesn't matter if I live or I die. But thankfully, God had different plans for my father. My father was released from that jail cell and he came to America in 1957. He was 18 years old. He couldn't speak English. He had nothing. Had $100 sewn into his underwear. I don't actually advise carrying money in your underwear. And he got a job washing dishes, making 50 cents an hour. And he worked 7 days a week. He paid his way through school. He and my mom went on to start a small business. So I grew up in Texas as the son of two small business owners, seeing the ups and downs, the triumphs and challenges of running a small business. Today, my father's a pastor. He travels the country preaching the gospel. And I'll tell you, Tennessee holds a special place in my heart, because Tennessee is now the home of the man who led my father to Jesus, Brother Galen Wiley. Brother Wiley is here tonight. And let me tell the story. So it was 1975.
Folks, what we're going to do is just pause it right there. Come get back to it. There's probably just about 10 more minutes left of this. We're going to go to a live rally going on right now. Bernie Sanders in Iowa, happening right now. Fox 10 News Now, always taking to the live events. Happening right now. Bernie Sanders rally.
People, very bright young people who are great with their hands, they don't want to go to college. What they want to do is become carpenters, sheet metal workers. They want to become bricklayers. They want to become plumbers. And they have a right to do that, and they have a right to get the training they need as well to get those good jobs. You know, when we talk about our responsibilities as adults, as parents, as grandparents, there is nothing more important than leaving our planet healthy and habitable for our children and our grandchildren. So let me tell you as straightforwardly as I can, and I tell you this as a member of both the Senate Environmental Committee and the Senate Energy Committee, someone who has spoken to scientists all over our country and all over the world. And that is, the debate is over. Climate change is real. It is caused by human activity. And it is already causing devastating problems in our country and around the world. And what the scientists also tell us is that if we do not get our act together, take on the fossil fuel industry, transform our energy system away from fossil fuel to energy efficiency and sustainable energy, that if we do not do that, by the end of this century, this planet, our only planet, could be between 5 degrees to 10 degrees Fahrenheit warmer. That is cataclysmic. That means more drought, more flooding, more extreme weather disturbances, more rising sea levels, more acidification of the ocean. It means more international conflict as people all over the world fight for limited natural resources. In my very strong view, we have a moral obligation to work with countries all over the world. We can't do it alone. Countries like China, Russia, India, and other countries, and transform our energy system away from fossil fuel. And let me do something now and connect the dots, okay? Amazing. I am the most progressive member of the United States Senate. And in that capacity, needless to say, I have strong disagreements with my Republican colleagues on almost everything. But, and here's the but, I sit on committees with Republicans, and we talk about how we deal with cancer, how we deal with Alzheimer's disease, how we deal with diabetes, how we deal with those things. And Republicans offer very sane comments. We may disagree, but no one there is attacking the researchers or the doctors who come forward. But something is very different with regard to climate change. Virtually the entire Republican Party has rejected the science, and many of them are busy attacking scientists. Why is that? That's right. And this gets back to a corrupt campaign finance system. It's not the Republicans don't read the literature or talk to scientists. They do. But what they understand is if they were to stand up tomorrow, if some Republican candidate for president were to stand up and say, you know, I've read the literature and I've talked to people, this is a serious problem, we have got to address it in a serious way. On that moment, that Republican candidate would lose his or her funding from the Koch brothers and the fossil fuel industry. That's the fact. That's the reality. That is what a corrupt campaign finance system is doing to this country. I say to my Republican colleagues, I understand that it is difficult for you to lose your funding from the fossil fuel industry. But I ask you to think about your kids and your grandchildren and the future of this planet and do the right thing. Now, what this campaign is about is asking each and every American to think big, not small. If we were a poor country, and somebody said to you, well, you know, we should make sure that all capable people have the opportunity to get a higher education. We should have paid family and medical leave. And if we were a poor country, people would say, you're crazy. We just can't afford to do that. But I want everybody here to know that the United States of America today is the wealthiest country in the history of the world. Most people don't know that because almost all of the new income and wealth is going to the 1%. But our job is to say, what can we accomplish? What should we accomplish for our kids and our grandchildren in the wealthiest country in the history of the world? And I will tell you one thing that we must accomplish. There is one major country on earth, one country, that does not guarantee health care to every man, woman, and child as a right. That's the United States. That has got to end. The Affordable Care Act, which I voted for and helped write, I'm on the committee that did that, has made some important gains. Among many other things, we have eliminated the obscenity of pre-existing conditions. Some 17 million people today have health insurance who otherwise would not have. That is not insignificant. But today, despite the Affordable Care Act, 29 million people continue to have no health insurance, and millions of people, including many in this room, are underinsured with high deductibles and co-payments. Am I right? Meanwhile, despite the fact that we have so many uninsured and underinsured, we end up spending far, far more per capita than do the people of any other country. We spend almost 3 times per capita more than the British do, and they guarantee health care to all of their people, 50% more than the French do. In my view, our job is to do 2 things. Number 1, make health care a right for all people. Number 2, do it in a cost-effective way, and that means a Medicare for all single-payer program. When we talk about where we are as a nation, let us not forget that as the holiday season, as Christmas comes in a few days, families are going to be united and have joyful times. But in America today, there are some 11 million people who are undocumented. Many of them are living in fear. They're living in the shadows. Many of them are in families that are separated, where mom may be south of the border while the kids are in this country. In my view, we have got to move toward comprehensive immigration reform and a path toward citizenship for the undocumented. Back in 2002, it seems many lifetimes ago, but back in 2002, President George W. Bush, you all remember Bush, he told us that it was imperative that we invade Iraq. Dick Cheney told us that. Donald Rumsfeld told us that, and I listened to that debate very carefully. And I concluded, because the issues of war and peace and whether we send kids off to potentially get killed is the most important vote that any member of Congress makes, I listened very, very carefully. And I concluded that Bush and Cheney were not telling the truth, and I voted against the war in Iraq. And I believe that history will record that vote as the right vote. And if you go to my website, berniesanders.com, or go to YouTube, listen to what I said way back in 2002. And it really gives me absolutely no joy to tell you that much of what I feared would happen about the destabilization in the region did in fact take place. And now we face another crisis with ISIS, a barbaric organization. ISIS, which attacked Paris recently, which attacked Lebanon recently, which brought down a Russian airliner recently. In my view, ISIS must be destroyed. But it is not good enough for my Republican friends to talk about how tough they are. We need a policy that is not just tough, but which is smart. Which is smart. And what does that mean? What it means is that the United States of America alone cannot and should not do it all. What it means is that we should not get involved in perpetual warfare in the Middle East, decade after decade after decade. In a region of the world which is suffering so many horrific problems, Gulf region, the Middle East, there are very few heroes. One of them is the country of Jordan, a small country led by King Abdullah II. And this small country has reached out, taken in all kinds of refugees. And King Abdullah recently made a very profound statement. What he said is, yes, terrorism is an international issue, but it is primarily a Muslim issue, because what we are fighting for is the soul of Islam. And what he said, as a Muslim, he said, you have groups like ISIS that are hijacking our religion, and we, the Muslim people, have got to take them on and defeat them. And I agree with King Abdullah. What I believe is there must be a strong international coalition. Muslim nations must put aside their many differences. They must have the troops on the ground to destroy ISIS. They must be supported by the United States, England, France, Russia, and the other powerful nations of the earth. But the boots on the ground, for a dozen different reasons, must be Muslim boots, not American boots. Let me close by saying this. When we think big, not small, when we understand that we are the wealthiest country in the history of the world, we understand that there is nothing that we cannot accomplish if we stand together and not let our opponents divide us up. And what this campaign is about is thinking big, is telling the world that yes, in America, we can guarantee health care to all of our people as a right. We can make sure that veterans are not sleeping out on the street. We are going to end institutional racism. We are going to lead the world in transforming our energy system. We are going to have the best child care and pre-K system in the world. And yes, at a time of massive income and wealth inequality, the wealthiest people and the largest corporations will start paying their fair share of taxes. Thank you all very much.
folks, what an event we just saw. Bernie Sanders live in Iowa. All right, folks, this is wrapping up. So what we're going to do is just play the last 10 minutes of the Ted Cruz event that we were playing right before this live event came back on.
A little kid. My parents were living up in Calgary. Neither one of them were Christians. Both of them were drinking far too much. And my father left my mother and me. He decided he didn't want to be a husband anymore, and he didn't want to be a father to his toddler son. He went down to Houston. And after a couple of months, colleagues in Houston in the oil and gas industry invited him to come to a Bible study. And for whatever reason, my father said yes. He went to that Bible study. And as he sat there listening to people share their stories, what struck him, all of them had problems, all of them had challenges. There's one woman he remembers in particular. It's a woman who described how her son would beat her in order to get money to buy drugs. They all had challenges, and yet they had what Scripture describes as a peace that passes understanding. And my father couldn't understand it. He couldn't understand where that came from, how that could be. My father began asking questions, and the folks holding the Bible study, they said, well, I'll tell you what. Our pastor is coming to the house the next night. Will you come over and you can ask him those questions? So the next night my father came there, and Brother Wiley came, and my father began asking him questions. Now my father was young, he was smart, he was a scientist, he was an atheist. He was certain he knew everything. And he argued until 11 o'clock at night. And then at 11 o'clock at night, my father said, all right, what about the man in Tibet who's never heard of Jesus? Now, wisely, Brother Wiley didn't take the bait, because he'd been there another 4 hours. He just said, Raphael, I don't know about the man in Tibet, but you've heard of Jesus. What's your excuse? And my dad describes that hit him like a sledgehammer. And he dropped to his knees. and he gave his life to Jesus. That next Sunday, my dad was baptized. And then he drove to church, or drove to the airport, rather, bought a plane ticket, and flew back to Calgary and my mother and me. Now, a few years later, when I was 8 years old, I became a Christian. And Brother Wiley baptized me. When I was last in Tennessee, he came to the gathering. I didn't know he was going to be there until just a few minutes beforehand. And I hadn't seen him in 35 years. I last saw him when I was 10 years old. Now, not much rattles me. But I got to tell you, that choked me up something powerful. And I told him afterwards, I said, thank you for on that night, April 15th, 1975, sharing the gospel with my dad. By passing on the good news, not only did you transform his life, not only did you transform my mother's life, but it transformed my life, it transformed the lives of my 2 little girls. I never would have met Heidi, the daughter of missionaries, my wife and best friend in the world. There's a very good chance my mother never would have become a Christian. There's a very good chance I never would have heard the gospel. My girls would not be raised in a Christian home. And the impact of one faithful servant spreading the good news ripples for generations. And I love you, Brother Wiley.
Folks, he told it just didn't happen. You and I live in a world that we don't understand much of. But I'm telling you, the providence of God will work in your life as it worked in mine, and with Ted and his father and mother and his cousin. I baptized Ted and his cousin the same night. Marvelous the things that Bebe has done in her life. In her family. You never know, the seed that you sow will come to fruit. And in heaven there'll be rejoicing, as there already is with Daryl and Pat Lasson, who opened their home that Raphael and I could have that encounter. God is good all the time, folks. And you and I live in the providence of God. And I don't want occasions like this to end without us realizing that God is in control. And Ted Cruz is committed not only to conservative philosophy, but with conservative theology as well. He's going to make us a great president to make our nation a great nation again. I want you to do something. I want all of you to stretch your hands out toward up here. We're going to pray. As you have your hands stretched out, we're going to lay hands on Ted Cruz. Father, in the name of Jesus and by the power of the Holy Spirit, I come to anoint my brother in the Lord. That son, Lord, that's raised up to follow you. And I pray, Lord Jesus, that he'll not let those who gave their lives in World War II, like my brother Preston did, go in vain. Like the thousands of others that are in this crowd that lost loved ones in the war since. And I pray, Lord Jesus, that you take the hands of this man and put the mantle upon him, that he might lead our land back to where we were, to the forefathers of our father and our mother, our God, Lord, God, days gone by. That we return our land to you. We commit that to you today, Lord, and thank you thank you that Ted came to visit in Nashville again today. And we could renew that, Lord. Help us not forget those little boys and girls that one day will grow up to be servants like Ted. So, Lord, he's been a good senator from my home state. He'll be a good president to all of our states. In Jesus' name, amen.
Well, this one is part political reality, part prayer revival. And let me tell you, I'm reminded of something my father said many times, which is, I saw freedom taken away once before, and I'll die before I lose it again. Under our Constitution, power is not vested in kings or queens or principalities. It's not vested in a president. It is vested sovereignty in we the people. My hope and optimism comes from the revival, the awakening that is sweeping this country as you look around at your brothers and sisters and friends and neighbors. We are here today because we are not willing to go quietly into the night. We are not willing to give up on our kids and grandkids. And if we stand together and defend freedom, if we stand together and defend the Constitution, if we stand together and defend the Judeo-Christian values upon which this nation was built, if we stand as one, as we the people, we will bring back, we will restore that last best hope for mankind, that shining city on a hill that is the United States of America. Thank you, and God bless you.
Folks, what an event from Ted Cruz earlier today in Nashville. Campaign 2016, here we go. It's just heating up. We take you now, guys, out. The Marco Rubio event that happened earlier today.
Number one is more education on the front end, more awareness for young people about the dangers of these drugs and how they can lead to permanent addiction, and how just because they are prescribed by a doctor does not make them harmless. Number two is more investment in alternatives to pharmaceuticals that are opiate dependent. And number three, more treatment options for people that do become opiate dependent, so that we treat it as what it is, a medical condition, a disease that needs to be managed and either cured or chronically managed for the rest of your life, not as some sort of, wrongdoing on your part. Because there is a large number of people today that became opiate dependent on the basis of following their doctor's advice years ago, and now they have no alternative. They're physically dependent on it, and the withdrawal is so painful and so difficult that you really can't do it without help. You just can't. Very tough issue.
I have a question, and it's going back a little bit to your immigration. And this city was built by immigrants. Mm-hmm. My great-grandparents came from Norway. My grandfather worked for Brown Company. He quit school at 9 so he could help pay the bills. He became an engineer for Brown Company and built the dam that's across the street here. My question is, they had to come here on visas. They had to have a plan. How do all these people get here now? Undocumented. How do we let them in? How do they stay here?
Mm-hmm. Well, about 40% of them come on visas. And then the visa expires and they don't leave. And so.
And why not? Why doesn't somebody check up on these people?
Because we don't have an entry-exit tracking system. We're basically, America's a hotel that checks people in, but we have no idea if you checked out of your room. So we don't know if they're overstayed. Yeah. Well, and that's why we need an entry-exit tracking system at both airports and seaports, so that we know in real time. So I talk about this all the time. Is why, and we need to know in real time when people come in and when they leave, so we have a real-time record of who's overstayed visas. That needs to be fed into an e-verify system, where employers are required to verify you online whether the person you are hiring is legally here. Today, the only requirement is that you sign a paper and produce a Social Security card, but those are easy to make fraudulent.
Yes, and down in Florida, when I worked for Burger King down there, they had a manager that had 2 Social Security numbers, and out the window she went, you know.
Yeah. It happens.
That's our tracking system, and if we know they've got a Social Security number, then why can't we keep tracking them?
Well, oftentimes they're using someone else's Social Security number is what happens when they're here illegally.
6 years ago or something like that.
Yeah, sometimes. They also vote in Chicago and places like that. But so your point is, that's the second point is, when you need to have a more reliable, because ultimately, why do people come illegally to America or overstay visas? Because they know they can. They know someone who did. So let's say that your cousin comes illegally to the United States and 6 months later is working and making money and sending it back. And so it encourages you to try the same thing because they did it. We know it can be done. So I think it's important. You have to shut off the job magnet, and you do that through E-Verify. You have to cut down on the overstays, and that's how you do the entry-exit tracking system, so we know in real time who's overstayed visas, and that information is fed into E-Verify. And the third thing you've got to do is there's got to be more physical, literal security on the southern border, not just for immigration purposes, but for all these other things, including national security. And it's not rocket science how you do that.
Look at the guys that bombed 9/11.
Well, they were here on student visas.
In a Burger King down there.
Yeah.
They came in smiling and making comments so that we would remember them. But, you know, how did they get here and stay here so long?
They came on student visas, and in fact, we now know that ISIS, for example, is actively recruiting people like doctors, physicians, and also student visa people that don't fit your typical profile to use the legal immigration system of the United States to legally enter the United States. The San Bernardino attacker was here on a fiancé visa. It's actually...
Her husband was a legal resident. He was born here.
He's a U.S. citizen, absolutely. Born and raised in the United States, radicalized online, which tells you that homegrown violent extremism is a huge threat that we face. But on the issue of her, his fiancé, here's an example of, no matter how much the administration says we're fully vetting people, this was a process breakdown. In essence, they vetted her. They just didn't vet her well enough. It broke down. For example, they never confirmed that they even knew each other before they got engaged. I mean, that's a huge red flag, right? You've never met each other. You don't even know each other, but you're engaged. I think that's strange. And they didn't pick up on that. They never followed up to confirm it.
Countries do that.
Well, I think in the 21st century, that's a huge red flag. If you're engaged to someone you've never met or even heard about, and you're using to bring them in, you got a big problem. And again, the law required them to confirm that they knew each other before they were engaged, that they had met before they became engaged. But they didn't do it. Somebody who was in charge of processing the paper didn't do their job. And so this is an example of what a different threat we now face. Because 20 years ago, that sort of situation was not right. It would be illegal, but it was probably an arranged marriage designed to give somebody residency. In the 21st century, at a time when already millions of Americans are struggling paycheck to paycheck, so they want me to support policies that hurt our economy, but don't really do anything for our environment. They just set an example. I think that's a bad trade-off. So what is a better approach? And by the way, this deal in Paris is a disaster too. Number one, the Chinese have signed this agreement that they're going to cut carbon emissions, and we all know how the Chinese always keep every agreement they ever signed to, right? Like they signed an agreement not to cyber attack the United States when they visited Washington, and the next day they were conducting cyber attacks. But the second point that I would make is, the Chinese have said, and by the way, we agree to all these benchmarks. We are the leading carbon emitters in the world, the Chinese are. We agree to all these benchmarks that have been set. But we're only going to do them if it doesn't hurt our economy. Well, it's going to hurt your economy, so that means they're not going to do it. The third thing that's really outrageous is the president committed us to a fund where you, the American taxpayer, is going to contribute money to a global fund to help developing countries. And who are the developing countries? China's a developing country. India's a developing country. So we're basically going to take money away from you to help them lower their carbon emissions. I'm not supporting that. And the fourth point I would make is, how do we deal with it? I think innovators are already helping us deal with it. America's already cleaner than it was. America is already becoming, it's trending even cleaner than we've ever been, but not because of government mandates. Why has America become cleaner? Because the American innovator figured out how to drill sideways. So now we can use more natural gas than ever, a lower carbon fuel, for example, than coal. Why is America more innovative? Because we become more energy efficient. Today, cars get more miles per gallon than they've ever gotten before. Why is America moving in a cleaner direction? Because battery life and electrical powered cars are becoming longer and increasingly more affordable. Why has America become cleaner? Because American technology and innovation is making wind power and solar panel power and renewables more cost effective and more market competitive. The American innovator, given the space and the time, will continue to do this for us. We are moving in this direction anyway, and we are moving in this direction for purposes of energy independence. We're moving in this direction for purposes of having the most diverse portfolio possible. But these government measures that they're trying to ram down our throat are going to dramatically hurt our economy. I, in good conscience, cannot support policies that take a country that is already struggling to provide jobs and upward mobility for millions of people and make it worse, while the countries that are leading the world in pollution are doing nothing except polluting more and emitting even more carbon. So I want us to deal with these issues on the basis of innovation. And by the way, by relying on sources of fuel that are cleaner, like natural gas, which America has an abundant supply of, like nuclear energy, which we know how to do better than anyone in the world, and it is a zero carbon emission fuel. And these are things that, let's do the other things too, wind, solar, biofuels, let's do them all. Let's lead the world in all of them. But don't let the government artificially pick one over another, because you're manipulating the market and you're driving up costs for people that are already struggling with a high cost of living.
Senator Rubio, so glad to have you here.
Thank you.
My name's Nathan Wells, and I'm a full-time student at the White Mountains Community College. I wanted to preface my question by saying that last year we had a job fair at the college, and there was a state trooper that had a table set up, and he was asking me, we were making small talk, and he was talking. And he asked me what my major was. When I told him my major was early childhood education, he said, "Oh, that's the wrong field." He said, "You're never going to make any money there." And the sad thing is that he's correct. There's very, very little money to be made in that field. But my question would be, given the current rise in developmental disabilities, we're talking rise in drug use, rise in poverty, and an alarming rise in violence. The evidence shows that all of those pieces can be largely done away with if children are given the right care in the first few years of life. So my question for you is, how, as president, could you financially empower the field of early childhood education?
Well, I support early childhood education. I have throughout my time in public service, and continue to believe that it is a very effective way that children as young as 2, 3, or 4 should be in learning environments, not just warehousing childcare. But I also believe the federal government really has no role to play in that. That is a local and state issue. And in fact, if you put the federal government in charge of it, they'll mess it up. They'll make it worse than ever. And that's what's happening now. And so I think one of the things we need to begin to accept is that there is not a federal government solution to every problem in our country. That the President of the United States is not in charge of every issue before our land. The federal government is a very limited government, designed to do things like national security and leave the rest up to state and local communities. If you wanted to create innovative new policies to get more people into early childhood, you're going to have a lot more influence in front of your school board or your local community than you're ever going to have in Washington, D.C. So that's where the power to make these decisions matter. Now, I do think I support policies that will make it more affordable and easier for people to do it. Like, for example, I support an increase in the per-child tax credit. Why do I support that? It's not just because I have 4 children. It's because I know that raising children in the 21st century is expensive. And one of those expenses that's in place is, what do you do with your kids during the day while you're working? So take the case of a single mother who makes $15 an hour and has 2 kids on her own. Someone's got to watch them while they're 2, 3, 4, 5 years old before they get into kindergarten. So today, the only options available to you are a child care center in some communities, where they'll watch the kids, they'll feed them, they'll put them down for a nap, but they're not learning. If we could empower parents to keep more of their own money through a refundable increase in the child tax credit, where each child, you have to be working to get it, so it's pro-work, these families have more financial resources to put their kids in a learning environment at that young age. The second thing is, I believe that the child care tax credit, which has been 30 out of 50 states, child care is more expensive than going to college. Okay, think about that. In 30 out of 50 states, child care is more expensive than going to college. I actually think we should expand the child care tax credit so that students can use it. Because one of the things that will keep single parents from going back to school is they have no one to watch their kids. Again, empowering them with more money of their own that they can use to put their kids in a better setting. The other thing I'm a big supporter of is school choice. And the reason why I support school choice is because the only people in America who cannot put their kids in the right setting are poor people. Rich people can pay for them to go to any school they want. Upper middle class families just move to a better neighborhood with better schools. The only people in America that we say to them, you must send them to the school we tell you to, even if the school isn't working, are poor families. So that's why I'm a supporter of school choice. That's why I'm a supporter of creating a scholarship, of allowing companies to pay a portion of their corporate taxes to a not-for-profit scholarship organization that gives scholarship to poor families to send their kids to the school of their choice, and hopefully empower more parents to get them into these settings. So as president, I will have no problem saying that we should put more of our children at a young age in learning environments at 2, 3, and 4 years of age so that they're learning. Kids can learn to read at 4 years old. And my kids did. But ultimately, what those programs look like and how they're designed have to be decided at the state and local level, because that's where you're going to find innovation that will open the doors to that. So as president, I have no problem telling people that early childhood education is important, but it is primarily a state and local function. We don't need the federal government involved in pre-K through 12 education. We don't need Common Core. We don't need any of these things. That power belongs at the state and local level, where you can influence them a lot easier than you can your congressman, your senator, the president, or some bureaucrat at the Department of Education.
That the federal program of Head Start is a failure?
Well, I would say that the program of Head Start is outdated, because basically the child has to follow the benefit as opposed to the benefit follow the child. Today, the Head Start is largely only available for specific areas that they tell you Head Start funds are only available here. What I would like to see is those funds turned over into a fund that follows the child, so that if you qualify for Head Start, you can use those funds to go to any setting that you want to put your child in, not just the places the federal government says are the places you can put them in. It really needs to be a benefit that follows the child, not the child have to follow the benefit.
We need programs in our schools, too, that help young couples, young teenage girls and boys to know what's expected of them as parents. I mean, I grew up with flower power children growing up and finding their own path. Now, if these people have had children, what did they tell their children about being a grown-up?
Well, you just hit the nail on the head, and that is, there's a lot of problems in our country that the government will not be able to fix. There's no law I can pass to make people better parents. There's no law I can pass to make people better husbands or wives. If I could, my wife would probably run for office if she could get something like that passed. I think we need to increasingly as a society recognize that some of the most influential things we will ever do happen in our homes. That what happens in our house is oftentimes more important than what happens in the White House. We do have very significant societal problems in America. And as heartbroken as we may be, there are limits to what government can do about it. Now, that's why I'm for a pro-family tax code, because I think empowering family will have an impact on our long-term as a society. That's why we shouldn't have any policies that discourage marriage or family formation. That's why I'm a supporter of religious liberties, because I believe that our faith communities are an important part of instilling and reinforcing values in our people. But ultimately, guys, as a country, we have to take responsibility for ourselves. For ourselves, for our families, for our children, not constantly look to the government and say, Mr. President, what are you going to do about the fact that, families, the kids today aren't being taught values? Well, that's the job of parents and communities, not the job of the government. And if we try to get the government to do it, they're going to mess it up.
Do you think religion plays a part in that?
Absolutely.
It's not the center of the home anymore.
I think the faith community is critical. Now, look, we're a free country. You want to worship trees, you can worship trees. You want to worship nothing at all, you have a right to worship nothing at all. But I am telling you that the values that are Judeo-Christian values are a key component of this nation's 200 years success. And the reason why is it teaches us to be charitable. It is not a coincidence that the American people are the most charitable people on earth. The government's not making us contribute to charity. You know why we do it? Because our faith has taught us that caring for the less fortunate is a moral obligation. A faith community gives reason behind our laws. When I teach my kids don't do something because it's illegal, well, laws can always be changed. But if I can teach my kids don't do something because your Creator in heaven is very disappointed in you, that's a powerful way to instill values in people. And so absolutely it is.
We're letting atheists dictate to what we can present out there.
Well, I'm probably not going to win the atheist vote, so I'm done. But I think we're a free country. If people want to believe in nothing, they have a right to do that. What they don't have a right to do is impinge on the rights of people that do believe in something to exercise those beliefs in their lives and in their community. So last night, I think it's in Maine, a teacher was forced to take down a Christmas tree from her classroom. Now, it was a Christmas tree with Hello Kitty ornaments. There wasn't even any sort of religious connotation to it. I mean, things have gone too far. I mean, here's the point. If you're offended by a Christmas tree, don't look at it. I mean, who's offended by a Christmas tree? Who's offended? I mean, I see all kinds of symbols of different faith. It doesn't offend me. We've gone too far on this stuff, right? I mean, it's gone crazy to the point now where you're afraid to say Merry Christmas to somebody because they might get offended. Why? If you don't believe it, why are you offended? What would offend you from something you don't think is true? So I think we've gone too far in the opposite direction here. We're a free society. We're a pluralistic society. I respect everyone's right to believe in whatever you want. But it's not just the right to believe. It's the right to exercise your faith. And that's a critical difference. One thing is to say, you have a right to believe whatever you want, but keep it to yourself. That's not what the Constitution says. It is the freedom to exercise your faith, and that means to live out the principles of your faith. And for people that are concerned about that, well, let me tell you what my faith teaches me. My faith teaches me to love my enemies, to care for my neighbors, to feed the naked and to clothe the naked and feed the hungry and care for the less fortunate. These are incredible values. You better hope the next president of the United States is influenced by values such as that. And it's not a coincidence that this country that had such strong principles in our founding has been so successful. I guess I'd make one more point in this regard. Our nation doesn't even make sense without these spiritual principles, because on its very founding, this country was created on the belief that we are all given certain rights by our Creator. Not by the king, not by the government, not by the Constitution, that our rights come from an all-powerful God. Life and liberty and the pursuit of happiness are God-given rights. And the purpose of government is to protect those rights, not to decide them or to grant them. So we were founded on a spiritual principle. If you yank that away, then where do these rights come from? They're only whatever your leaders decide they are. And that's what we stop being special or different.
Made 30 million laws to enforce 10 Commandments.
I like that. 30 million laws to enforce 10 commandments. Yes, ma'am. Oh, sorry, it's a gentleman behind you, but we'll get to you too.
Morning, Senator. I have a three-part question. As a veteran, I'd like to know how you're going to streamline our benefits with the VA to include even basic services and homelessness for vets. Secondly, if we put boots on the ground in the Middle East, being an Iraq War veteran, one of the things that tripped us up a lot was our rules of engagement. So how would you tackle that problem? And lastly, as a current government employee, I'm not going to say I've been the victim, but I've had to go through not receiving a paycheck because the government shuts down. So next time the government shuts down, is that going to include congressmen and senators?
Yeah. Okay. Well, a couple of points. And the third point is the government shouldn't shut down. It should be reduced. Government should be made smaller, but it shouldn't shut down. And it doesn't help your story. Ultimately, when the government reopens, everybody gets their checks back retroactively. It didn't help you if you missed a payment on your bills. On the second point that you make about rules of engagement, well, let me get to the first two on the veterans. On the veteran point, I would say, number one, I'm the only one running that's ever done anything about the VA. And last year I passed that law that gave us the power. And let me back up. There are really good people at the VA. So this is not a smear on everyone working there. I would tell you the vast majority of people that work at the VA are good people. They care about veterans. Some of them are veterans themselves. And then you've got people that are not doing a good job. And those people, you should be able to fire them. So last year we passed a law that said if you're not doing a good job, the VA can fire you if you're a senior executive. We don't know how many people they fired. It looks like they've only fired one, and that's on appeal. Meanwhile, they've given out dozens of bonuses. That makes no sense. So when I'm president, we will actually not just enforce that, we will pass a second law that says it's not just senior executives. If anyone is not doing a good job at the VA, we can fire you. We will do that. The other thing we're going to do is we're going to make the benefits follow the veteran, not the veteran follow the benefits. So the GI Bill. Does the GI Bill say, here's the GI Bill, but you can only use it to go to military colleges? It says you can use the GI Bill to go to any accredited school in America. That's what it says. Why isn't the VA benefits for health care the same thing? It will be when I'm president. Your VA benefits will follow you. If you want to go to the VA because you love the VA, you can go to the VA. But what if they make you wait 6 months to see a doctor? And there's a hospital down the street ready to see you right away. You should be able to take your benefits and go there instead. My brother is going through that right now. Not exactly that case. He's going through a long and very complicated appeal. He was a Green Beret from 68 to 71 in the 7th Special Forces. One day he jumped out of an airplane and knocked out his front teeth. They took him to the dentist. They fixed him up, but they never made a record of it because he was in the 7th Special Forces. And, you know, they had a different process back then for Special Forces. Now he needs dental work every 10 years. He has to file these long appeals processes, and his brother's a senator. So just imagine somebody else that what they're going through. It's outrageous. So we need to process the VA so that it follows the benefit, and it's easier to process to do that. You raised homelessness and other issues. Absolutely. It's a huge problem. One of the things that's happening in our country, unfortunately, number one is the mental aspects of coming back from war. We have veterans that have suffered traumatic brain injury and don't know it because there was a detonation nearby. It created a concussive effect. It was never documented, and then it begins to manifest itself. Worry about concussions in football. Worry about concussions among our veterans who have suffered traumatic brain injury, and it wasn't even recorded because they were near a blast, and the brain is very delicate in those sort of situations, but no one ever wrote it down, and now it's starting to manifest itself through memory loss. The other is integrating people back into society. Why don't we give people credit, college credit, licensing credit for what they learned while they were in the military? So if you were a truck driver and you were hauling explosives on a dirt road in Iraq or Afghanistan, are you telling me that you don't qualify for a commercial license in America to haul eggs on the interstate highway system? If you were learned skills, if you fired these $1 million missiles to fly through the window of a building halfway around the world, you're telling me you're not qualified to run a manufacturing plant or do work in the private sector? We should create more synergy between the skills people acquire in the military and how we license it in the private sector. Let me give credit to a union here. The welders, pipe fitters, and plumbers are doing a really good job of taking in veterans and giving them the additional training they need to be welders, pipe fitters, plumbers, and the trades. We should be doing more of that. Give them credit. They've done a good job on that. We need more of that sort of integration for our veterans, where the skills that you're learning in the public sector are now being applied to integration in the private sector. And your question about rules of engagement, most important question the president ever has to answer. There's a very straightforward criteria. Number one, is a national security interest of the United States at stake? In essence, not a symbolic strike, not we're sending a message to the world strike. Are we dealing with this militarily because the interests of the United States are at stake? Number two, is military force the best option available for us? In essence, has diplomacy failed? Or is there no diplomacy possible? Because, for example, ISIS has no ambassadors or diplomats, and they can't be negotiated with anyway. Number three, are we providing our men and women the resources they need to succeed? And that means the equipment and the training and the weaponry and the intelligence necessary to win. The objective is victory. We've defined victory. This is what victory looks like. And you have the resources you need to win, and you have the rules of engagement that you need to win. Don't put men and women into harm's way without the resources and without the appropriate rules of engagement. And we've done that, and we're doing that. That's why these defense cuts are so problematic. These defense cuts mean we will not be able to provide them in a short amount of time the resources they need to succeed. These cuts in the military mean that people are now being redeployed much faster and much longer than they've been in the past, putting a tremendous strain on families and our servicemen and women. So these are the criteria that I will look at before ever putting any one of our servicemen and women in harm's way. We make a very important promise to men and women in uniform, and here's the promise we make. We will never put you in a fair fight. If we ever put you into a fight, you're going to have better training, better weapons, and more information than any adversary you will ever face. There is no way we will be able to keep that promise if we keep cutting our military every year the way we're doing now. We won't be able to keep it. And that's not fair to you, and that's not fair to the people that have served us in the past, and it's not fair to the people that are serving us now. We'll change that when I'm president. I promise you that.
Senator, can you hear me?
Yes, sir.
First of all, thank you for coming. And I'm speaking here, part of the American dream. That's your platform. Mm-hmm. And I'm a first-generation American. My parents were born in Quebec province, and I'm a union member. And I really appreciate your mentioning the union, because that's the crux of my question. I've worked 3 jobs. I travel 125 miles a day, 6 days a week to go to work, because there's no work here for me. The 3 jobs that I've had were at the biomass here in Berlin, and an energy plant.
You drove by it?
Okay.
Yeah.
And,
the wood chips?
Pardon me?
The wood chips plant?
Yes, the wood chips, yeah. So I worked there this year, and I worked at a natural gas pipeline in Williston, Vermont, and drove it 2.5 hours every day to go to work and back. And I worked at a coal-fired power plant in Bow, New Hampshire, Merrimack Station, which was owned by its Eversource, now it was public service. And the crux of my question is that there's a wall in between the Republican Party and union people. I'm conservative. pro-life and pro-Second Amendment, and I'm probably, I didn't go along with my parents and go, I'm not a Roosevelt Democrat, I'm a Republican. I was a Republican, I'm an independent now. But I'm an independent because the Republican Party ceded northern New Hampshire, the 3 northernmost counties. We don't see a Rubio office here. We cede our elections to the Democratic Party up here. And what I want to know is Barack Obama made Joe the Plumber famous with his question about the coal-fired power plants. Barack Obama said that he would overregulate coal-fired power plants, which is where I get a lot of my work, out of existence. And so now we have windmills, we have all these alternative energies. Number one, would you consider a Manhattan type project to nuclear fusion instead of fission, power plants? Number two is, would you break down the walls? Ronald Reagan, our most conservative president, the best president of my lifetime, was once a president of the Screen Actors Guild for like 9 years. And so he was a conservative and pro-union. So what I'm asking, and the Republican Party needs minorities, they need union people. I see union people on jobs in the lunchroom with Bernie stickers on their hard hats. It blows my mind. And so we need to tear down the walls we need to be inclusionary with union people. And I was glad that you gave a shout out to the pipe fitters and the iron workers. I'm a union laborer. Here's my union card, and I'm a member of the Massachusetts Laborers Union. I don't want to travel to work, but if we could have a sensible energy policy with the Keystone Pipeline, are you in favor of the Keystone Pipeline? Yeah, absolutely. And is there a way, people, so that I'm just so tired of ceding the all the union workers, say 90% of them, that vote Democrat, because that's what they do historically.
I agree with you 100%.
What will you do to include union people on your march to the White House, to the Oval Office?
So first of all, the quarrels I've had with labor unions have been on the public side. And that is because the government works for us, not us for the government. And it goes back to this thing I was talking about, the VA. If you are not doing a good job, government should have the ability to fire you. And you've got public unions that have become so powerful that you can't fire a government employee even if they refuse to work or not work well. And that's what my quarrel has been. On the private side, I actually often highlight issues that the private unions care about. The Teamsters, the largest group of Teamsters in the world are UPS truck drivers, for example, and they're facing regulatory impediments. The welders, pipe fitters, plumbers, the Keystone Pipeline is just one project, but there are hundreds of other projects like that that are being held up by the regulatory state. So my argument basically is we're going to make America the best place in the world to create the kinds of jobs that people like you fill. And those jobs are being hurt right now by these regulations that you mentioned. You talked about wind. There's jobs in wind. There's jobs in solar. There's jobs, obviously, in biofuels and biomass. There's jobs in coal and nuclear and in natural gas. I want us to have the most diverse energy portfolio possible. Let's do it all. Let's be the leader in all of them. Why do we have to have one and not the other? Let's do all of them. That's what my argument. And we're going to make it easier to create jobs by making it all of them. Here's the other thing that's going to happen if you lower and stabilize the price of energy, which is why I always talk about natural gas. If we have a natural gas advantage over the rest of the world, which means that keeping the lights on and running a manufacturing facility is cheaper here than it is in another country because our gas prices and therefore our energy prices are significantly lower. Do you know what that means? That means we're competitive again. That means we can become an economy that makes things again. And once we become an economy that makes things again, do you know what that means? That means they got to hire people to run those machines and fix those machines and apply those machines. That means jobs are the kinds you're talking about. So I do agree with you that we need to do a better job of focusing on that reality because the agenda, and that's why I always talk about skills training. Part of the problem we have in America for the last 30 years is we started telling our kids, look, trade school are for the kids that aren't that smart. The smart kids go to college. The kids that aren't that smart, those are the ones that have to go to trade school. That's a lie. That is a lie. If you go to any of these 21st century manufacturing facilities and you see the machines that these people are operating, these are complex pieces of machinery, so they're smart. Number two, trade school are for kids that want to make $50,000 a year at 18 years of age. Because when you graduate and you're certified and ready to work as a welder, you can make $50,000 as a first-time welder. You can make $50,000 and up. Long-haul truckers. I know someone who's a long-haul trucker that made over $100,000. Hard work, a lot of driving, obviously, a lot of nights away from home. But we're not training people to do this work anymore. And part of it is this cultural disconnect that we've started telling young people, those jobs are not the jobs you want. We have to have a president that celebrates that kind of work. That kind of work doesn't just empower people to make more money. That's what you build communities around. Entire communities are built around this. You get a major manufacturing facility back into a community, and that community springs to life. Because now what does that bring? Workers. And what do workers become? Customers for the shops, homeowners, volunteers at the PTA, the parents of the children that go to school, the volunteers at churches and synagogues on the weekends. This is the backbone of our country, and we need to bring it back. And we can. We can compete with anyone in the world, but not with a government that is keeping us from doing that. And that's what we have today. That is the disconnect. I come from that background. My parents weren't blue-collar workers in that sense. My mother was a maid at a hotel. My father was a bartender, a member of a union. I walked the picket line with him when I was 11 and 12 years old in Las Vegas, Nevada. So my point is, I come from that environment in the sense that these are the kinds of jobs. My parents were never rich. They were never famous people, never made a lot of money. Let me tell you what they were. They were homeowners in a safe and stable neighborhood. They were active parents in the lives of their children. They became retirees that weren't rich but lived with dignity and security. And all four of their kids are better off than them. That's the American dream. That's what makes us different from the rest of the world. And we need to make it easier for us to create more of those jobs. So I'm telling you, if you are a member of a labor union that works in energy, works in construction, works in developing infrastructure for anything, you should be really upset at this administration. Because these crazy regulations and these crazy tax policies are forcing the people that want to hire you to take those jobs to another country. That's what they're doing.
But that message isn't getting out, Senator.
Well, that's why we're here. Then we're going to get that message out. But thank you for reminding us. That's really important.
Why are you going to revise the tax code so it'll be more fair to everybody?
The tax code? Well, first of all, if I told you, design for me a tax code that encourages companies to leave America, you would be hard-pressed to find a better one than the one we have now. We have a tax code, number one, it has the highest combined business tax rate on the planet. On the planet. So basically, if you do business in America, you are going to pay more in taxes than you do in virtually any other developed country. We have a tax code that says to American businesses, if you make money in another country and you decide, I want to bring that money back to America, we're going to make you pay taxes on that money twice. So the result is they don't do it. They leave their money in the other country. You know how much money they've left in other countries? $2 trillion. Do you know what $2 trillion is? $2 trillion is the size of the entire Russian economy. That's what's sitting in American corporate cash being invested overseas instead of here. The third point is, you're talk about manufacturing and union jobs. We live in an economy now with this tax code that if a business says, you know what I'm going to do? I'm going to invest $100,000 in a new piece of equipment. And that new piece of equipment means I'm going to have to hire 2 or 3 people to operate it. Well, today, if you want that $100,000 to write it off your taxes, you got to do it on something called the schedule of depreciation over a number of years. We're going to fix all those things I just mentioned. Number one, every business in America, from the small S corporation that runs a dry clean shop to the big companies, all of them, none of them will pay more than 25%, not 35, 25% flat. That is a huge tax cut for small business. Because most small businesses are organized as S corporations or partnerships.
All right, folks, we just want to pause this event because we do have breaking news happening in the valley here.
Number two, we're going to have a territorial system of taxation. And what that means is if you're an American...
We don't know too much about this situation, but this is the Loop 202 westbound near the 101. Where fire and medical teams have just made their way onto the expressway here, and there's reports, nothing confirmed yet, but reports maybe of a baby in distress. Folks, this is in Chandler. Reports of a baby not breathing. Nothing confirmed yet, though. Folks, we're working to get you guys some more details here. Nothing yet confirmed, but obviously you see a major situation on the freeway here. We're going to get you the latest. Folks, we're going to go back to Marco Rubio as we wait to get some more details on this freeway situation here in Arizona.
Deal with them economically, diplomatically, culturally. You got to come through us. We should never accept that. From day one, he will know that we'll never accept that. So I'll go in knowing exactly who he is, and he'll know I know exactly who he is. Number two, in the issue of, we wouldn't be dealing with the mullahs in Iran. I mean, there's nothing really to negotiate with a radical Shia cleric. I've already said exactly what I would do on my first day in office. We will cancel the president's deal with Iran, and don't buy into all this talk that, oh, we can't do that, all these other countries are already on board. Guys, if a company has to decide whether to invest in Iran or in America, because if we reverse the sanctions, what it basically means is if you're doing business with Iran, you can't do business with America. You think they're going to pick the Iranian economy over the American economy? They're not. We are the sanctions. And so the point is we would reinforce those sanctions, and we'll make it very clear to them. If you want nuclear energy, you don't need it because you're an oil-rich country, but if you want nuclear energy, you can have it the exact same way South Korea has it, which is you can import enriched material. You don't need to enrich your own uranium and reprocess your own plutonium. And if you try to do that and build a weapon, we're going to destroy your program. We don't want it to lead to war, but war is a lot better than living in a world with a radical Shia cleric in Iran possessing nuclear weapons and the ability to deliver them to the United States. And so I've been very clear about this from the onset. So I feel not just confident in my ability to deal with it, what I feel very confident about is that I've been saying these things for 5 years before some of these things even happened. You may recall, but I think it was the third presidential debate, I said in less than 2 weeks, Vladimir Putin will be conducting airstrikes in Syria. And some people mocked me, you're talking about 2 weeks to the day. I'm talking about 2 weeks to the day. They started conducting airstrikes. I know what these people, who they are and what they're about. They have precedent in history of people just like them. We will deal with them for who they are. And more importantly, you will have a president that believes this is the most important and powerful country in the world and is going to act like it. Russia has a $2 trillion economy. We have a $19 trillion economy. Russia is not the equal to the United States on the global stage. They're an important country because between us we possess 90% of the world's nuclear weapons. And we have no quarrel with the Russian people. But their president is not someone that we're going to treat as someone who's an equal, especially given his goals and his aims. And Iran is governed by a radical Shia cleric. He's a religious figure who wants to trigger the apocalypse. There's no way in the world I'm going to leave my children with a world in which a guy like that has nuclear weapons. There's just no way we're going to do that. It's not going to happen. And we're going to be clear about it from my first day in office. Thank you for your patience. I know you were ready earlier.
Okay. That's why thank you very much, Senator, for coming here today. My question is really two-part. One, I think that race relations has been an all-time low under this administration, and part of that has affected the random violence towards police. As the wife of a police officer, and my son was just certified as a trooper in New Hampshire, this issue is very dear to my heart. And the silence from Washington has been deafening. And I want a president who has my son's back.
Absolutely. Let me tell you first of all, before I get the second point that I want to talk about this issue. The overwhelming majority of the men and women who serve us as law enforcement and first responders in this country are incredible people. And I say that because if, God forbid, tonight any of us run into trouble and we call 911, these are people that are going to be willing to show up and die before we do. Think about it. These are people we don't even know who are willing to put their lives on the line so that you or any of us are safe. One of the most moving images of the attack in San Bernardino is a video that someone took on their phone of a police officer telling the group with him, guys, don't worry, before any of you get hurt, it'll happen to me. This is the mindset of someone who goes out there every single day and does this. And this is also true not just for police officers anymore, because first responders, firefighters, and AMTs, one of the things that these killers in San Bernardino did is they were trying to leave behind radio-detonated pipe bombs.
Okay, folks, I just wanted to go back to that scene of the highway, because we did get confirmation. This is the 202 and the 101 in Chandler. A baby was having respiratory issues, and the parents were taking the baby to the hospital when it went into cardiac arrest, and the fire department and paramedics came on scene and then took over and took the baby to the hospital. That is all we know at this point here, folks. But just wanted to give you that update of this breaking news situation that we did cover here for you right here on Fox 10 News Now. Going back to Marco Rubio.
That is that when the first responders arrived, they would detonate them and kill the firefighters and police officers that responded to the call. So this is real, and we celebrate what they do for us every single day, because there is not a single one among us that at some point hasn't needed their help, whether it's a minor fender bender or something far worse. And we're so grateful to them for what they do. There are a significant number of communities in this country, however, where minority communities in particular feel as if their relationship with law enforcement is really bad. And I personally know people that have confronted this. I know a police officer in Miami, Florida, an African-American gentleman who's been pulled over 8 times in the last 2 to 3 years. Never given a ticket. So what is he to conclude from that? I'm being pulled over because someone looks at me and thinks I don't belong in this car in this neighborhood. And it upsets people. The point is, no matter how we feel about it, if you have a significant percentage of the American family, particularly young African-American males, but other minorities, who feel as if they're somehow looked at differently, whether we agree with them or not, the fact that they feel that way is an issue we've got to confront as a society. We have to be, and look, it's a lot of instances it's tough. You have an 18-year-old kid who commits a burglary, stupid, does this burglary. They hire a public, or maybe he isn't even committing the burglary. It was just part of 3 people that were involved in this. They all got arrested. They assign him a public defender. The public defender has 5,000 cases they're handling. So the public defender says, just plead guilty. You'll get a slap on the wrist. He pleads guilty. He's now got a conviction on their record. Then they try to go out, turn their life around and get hired, and no one will hire them because they got a conviction on their record. So they get angry, they get upset, they get disenchanted. Or an 18-year-old interacts with the criminal justice system, and instead of diverting them early, hopefully we can save this person, they get locked up. Basically, these prisons become trade schools for criminals, where other criminals are teaching you what they do when they get out. Then they get out and they're now stigmatized for the rest of their life. So we've got to confront all of this. A lot of this is societal. It's not government laws. A lot of it is we have a breakdown in our culture. And it's manifesting itself. Look, there is a consequence to broken families. And a lot of these kids are being raised in less than ideal circumstances, not just in minority communities. But when you have a child being raised by their grandmother, who's also raising 5 other kids, because dad has never been around, and mom is working 2 jobs, is in jail and rehab, or moved in with her boyfriend, this is you've got a lot of strikes against you. This is a difficult thing to deal with. These are societal issues we're confronting. It's real. So I do think it's important that as a president that understands both perspectives but doesn't exacerbate it. Yes, there have been instances in this country that I can't justify, and neither can you. You've seen some of these videos, okay? And they're troubling. And you've had other cases where we haven't been fair to law enforcement, where we've allowed lies to be perpetuated about what really happened. And as a result, you have police officers today that feel more targeted than ever, especially in some places when they hear this rhetoric. So we've got an issue here we need to confront. Let's not exaggerate. The overwhelming percentage of people that serve us, and I mean in the 90s of people that serve us in law enforcement, are good people that are doing the best they can in an increasingly difficult society. And then we've got an issue that we've got to address, especially with young African-American males who feel locked out of the promise of America. And they're a significant percentage of the American family. We can't be a great country if we don't address that. And you know who the first people to tell you that will be? Law enforcement. The ones that are patrolling those neighborhoods, that's why they get involved after work. That's why some of the best youth sports programs in America are run by law enforcement. Because they'd rather deal with these kids when they're 7 and 8 than have to deal with them when they're 18 or 19 and committing crimes. So I think we can figure this out, but we have to have a president that is a source of unity for America. Not someone that looks to use these issues as a way to pit us against each other in order to win the next election. Because presidents, and what presidents do and say, has consequences. And when you have a president that has spent 7 years pitting us against each other in order to get to 51% in the next election, you see the consequences of it. We won't have that when I'm president. So I want to thank you all for being here today. I'm really asking you for your vote. I need your help to get this done. I look forward. I know that some of you are going to take your time and analyze this process as you should. You are hiring someone that you're going to have to live with for the next 4 to 8 years. So it's got to be someone you like to begin with. But more importantly, you're doing so at an important time in our nation's history. Our identity as a nation is at stake. And I guess my point to you is, I know that times are tough. I know the issues we face are not easy. But we can address these things. Every generation before us did. Now it's our turn. And we're going to do it. And when we do, this is what history is going to say about us. That like every generation before us, we did our part. We confronted our challenges. We embraced our opportunities. And we left America a better place than we found it. So thank you and God bless you. Thanks for having me. Merry Christmas.
All right, folks, that is the Marco Rubio Town Hall event that we did want to show you. We got one more rally to show you this evening before we have to end the stream. Going to Carly Fiorina.
Anybody in here, don't they? Good to see you. Bill Pickford. Don't hold that against me. I had someone I was talking to today. I had this morning Netherlands, Belgium, and South Korea. And we had some good conversations about what's going on. Whoops. Get you back in there one day talking. I know you're real shy and neat and never have anything to say. I just this I've already had it.
And was the smartest cookie in the house. I hear that she graduated with 2 degrees from MIT and Stanford. And it is said that people would say not only is she the smartest woman in the room, she was the smartest person in the room. And in 1999, Hewlett-Packard recognized this and asked her to become the CEO of an international corporation. Carly knew how to bring change. Now, since then, she's left Hewlett-Packard, and she has moved into the private industry, but has served as chairperson of some very important organizations, nonprofits, advisor to the CIA, obviously our Secret Service, and all of our military respect her thinking. She is one who is going to bring change. She is one who we need to listen to what she has to say. And I want to ask you to join me, my husband Bill, and the entire Holy Smokin' family in welcoming Carly Fiorina to the restaurant.
Well, we got to take you on the road. I am delighted to be here at Holy Smokin' Restaurant. And by the way, did you know that Bill is a pit master? I love that. Do you have to do something special to become a pit master? Probably. Well, I don't know how, so good for you. And thank you all for being here so much. All right, so who's ready for Christmas? Really? Gosh, I'm not. I managed to get a Christmas tree up. That was a miracle. But I am looking forward to a couple days off for Christmas with my family. Now, who's this little one over here? This one won't talk to me much. But do you know what you want for Christmas? See, there is a young lady that knows what she wants. All right. Well, I hope Santa was listening to that. You know, I could start in a lot of places. And I don't want to talk too long because I'd love to take as many questions as you have. But maybe I'll start with this. We need to beat Hillary Clinton. Right? In a difficult and a perilous time, she's gotten every foreign policy challenge wrong. She's been wrong about just about everything. And whether or not everybody here in South Carolina has made up their minds about who they want to support, I hope you're here because you've decided you're going to support me. But maybe some of your friends and your neighbors and your colleagues haven't really decided. You just need to ask them a question. You need to say, in your heart of hearts, who do you want to see debate Hillary Clinton? And the answer everybody gives is Carly Fiorina. It's who everybody wants to see debate Hillary Clinton. That's a fact. That's a fact. People want to see that debate because they know what's going to happen in that debate. I'm going to win. I'm going to win. Because we need a nominee who's going to force Hillary Clinton to actually fight on ground she doesn't want to fight on. She wants to talk about anything but her mistakes as Secretary of State. She doesn't want to talk about her track record of lies. She wants to talk about the historic nature of her candidacy, anything other than her track record of accomplishment or lack thereof, or of trustworthiness or lies. And I'll force her to fight on that ground. But of course, we have to do more than beat Hillary Clinton. We actually have to right what is wrong about our country now. This is a great nation, but we're on the wrong track, and we all know it. And so I think we've reached a pivotal time where we have to take our country back, and that's why I'm running for president. But before I talk about that a little bit, is that a ding-dong? Okay. Before we talk about that, let me just tell you a little bit about myself. It is true that I started out typing and filing and answering the phones for a little 9-person real estate firm. I had graduated, yes, it's true, I got a degree from Stanford University, but truthfully, that degree was in medieval history and philosophy. So I was all dressed up with nowhere to go. I was completely unemployable. I went off to law school. My dad was a law professor. He kind of wanted me to follow in his footsteps. I hated law school, so I had the presence of mind to quit before the first exam. And now I'm really unemployable. And so I go back to work doing full-time what I had done part-time to put myself through school. I had put myself through school typing and filing. I was a Kelly girl. We used to call them Kelly girls. We were mostly young women who were temporary office personnel. It is true that the kids here don't know what I'm talking about when I say typing. My own granddaughters, I did a stint in the communications business. My own granddaughters don't know what I'm talking about when I say typing. They don't know what I mean when I say dial the phone. I have no idea what I mean. But in any event, I accepted the first job I was offered after I quit law school and typed and filed. And eventually, after about 6 months, 2 men who worked in that firm came up to me and said, we've been watching you. Maybe you could do more than type and file. Do you want to know what we do? And they kind of got me headed in the direction of business. Eventually, I would get an MBA, and I would go off and join AT&T as an entry-level salesperson. That's where I met my husband, Frank, 34 years ago. It was tough to be taken seriously, honestly, as a woman. It was 1980. I was this entry-level management trainee in a man's world, and I had a customer problem, and nobody was willing to tell me how to solve it. Most people ignored me, and finally somebody said, you've got to go talk to this guy, Frank Fiorina. He's a technical expert. And I went to talk to him, and not only did he take me seriously, not only did he solve my problem, but he was really cute, so I had to marry him. So we got married almost 31 years ago. He brought 2 little girls with him, Tracy and Lori. We have 2 granddaughters today, Kara and Morgan. And we have been very, very blessed in our lives. But like all of you, we've had hard times as well. I had a long battle with cancer. And if you have been touched by cancer, you know that it is a family affair. And at the end of that long battle, we buried our younger daughter, Lori, who was taken by the demons of addiction, as too many young people are. So I have known heartache too. And through the good times and the bad times, I have been sustained by the love of my family and the power of my faith and the kindness and compassion of many friends and many strangers I have met along the way. I think we're at a pivotal time in this nation's history. I am running for the presidency of the United States because I think these pivotal and perilous times call for a different kind of leadership. I first started thinking about running for president actually in the summer of 2014. I had given a speech, and this man came up to me after my speech and he said, "You know, Carly, we don't think of ourselves as a nation of limitless possibility anymore." And that really hit me, because this is a nation of limitless possibility. We always have been, and yet we don't think that anymore. We used to know that if something were worth doing, we as a nation would do it. We used to be certain that if something were difficult to do, we'd figure out how to do it. And we also knew that our children and our grandchildren's lives were going to be better than ours were. And yet we don't know that anymore. And when we lose the sense of limitless possibility that has always defined this nation, I think we lose the core of who we are. I know that my life is only possible in this nation. I have traveled and lived and worked all over the world, done charity, done business, done policy work on every continent on the planet, and have done so for 30 years. And I am keenly aware that it is only in this nation that a young woman can start out the way I did, typing and filing and answering the phones for a 9-person real estate firm, go on one day to become the chief executive of what we turned into the largest technology company in the world, and run for the presidency of the United States. That is only possible in this great nation. And is possible here because our founders built this nation on an idea, an incredible idea, actually, visionary, radical even. The idea was that here you had the right to fulfill your potential, to find and use what my mother used to call your God-given gifts. You could find your own possibilities. You could see them and you could seize them. Our founders used different words than I'm using. Our founders talked about the right to life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. But what they were talking about was the right to pursue possibilities. And they said that that right comes from God and cannot be taken away by government. I think we have reached a pivotal and perilous time in our nation's history where the truth is the possibilities for too many Americans, indeed the potential of this great nation, is being crushed by a government that has grown so big, so powerful, so costly, so complicated, so inept, and so corrupt, and a professional political class that refuses to do anything about it. Now, those are harsh words. But did you know that 75% of the American people now think the federal government is corrupt? I agree with them. And when I use the word corrupt, what I mean is that the government no longer serves those who pay for it. The government picks winners and losers. The government favors some over others. That's called corruption, ladies and gentlemen. And our government has as well become an inept bureaucracy that does not do what it's supposed to be doing. And meanwhile, 80% of the American people think we have a professional political class of both parties that cares more about its own power, position, and privilege than on actually getting anything done. And I agree with that as well. It's interesting. You know, it's not that people in politics are bad people. It's not that people in government bureaucracies are necessarily bad people. But what happens when you have a system? People get captured by the system. It's called the power of the status quo. It reminds me of the difference between managers and leaders. You know what managers are? They're not bad people. But managers are people who will not challenge the system. They accept the system as it is, even if it's really broken. They don't challenge the status quo. They operate within the status quo. And as the longer they stay in the system and the longer they stay with that status quo, the more they become part of the problem, not part of the solution. We got that going on in politics, ladies and gentlemen. One of my great heroes is Margaret Thatcher, and she once said, at a pivotal time in her nation's history, "I am not content to manage the decline of a great nation." Well, ladies and gentlemen, I think we have been managing the decline of this great nation for far too long. We have settled for a political system that does not serve us. We have settled for a government that does not perform on our behalf, and we cannot settle for this anymore. I am prepared. I have been tested, and I am prepared with your votes, with your prayers, with your support to lead the resurgence of this great nation. I am running for the presidency of the United States, ladies and gentlemen, because I think we have reached a pivotal and perilous time where we need to remember who we are. We were intended to be a citizen government. We were never intended to have a professional political class. We were never intended to have a vast, bloated government bureaucracy. Ladies and gentlemen, I am running for the presidency of the United States because I think we have reached a time. It is time for us to take our country back. And that is why I have rolled out my blueprint. Things that I want you to hold me accountable for. 6 things that must get done early, soon, in a Fiorina administration. These are not the only things we need to do to take our country back, to restore possibilities for every American, to cut our government down to size and hold it accountable, and to keep this nation safe. These are not the only things we must do, but these are the important things we have to begin by doing. And I've laid it out in writing and want you to hold me accountable because that's what I'm used to. I come from the same world you do, where we're held accountable. You know, it's only in politics where you get to say whatever you want. You can say something different than you said 6 months ago. You can say something that's completely divorced from reality, and somehow nobody ever gets held accountable. But not in the world we come from. In the world we come from, talk is cheap. In the world we come from, actions speak louder than words. And in the world we come from, you measure someone by the results they produce, not what they talk about. Right? So that's how I want to be measured. So let me go through this blueprint very, very briefly, and then I'll stop and open it up for your questions. These are things we must do to cut this government down to size, to restore possibilities for every American, and to keep this nation safe. Let us start with, we have to change how the government takes our money. We have to radically simplify the tax code. Did you know that we now have a 73,000-page tax code? 73,000 pages. How long have we been talking about tax reform? Forever. How long have you listened to Republican candidates for the presidency talk about reforming the tax code? Forever. And yet, here we go. We got 73,000 pages. And why is that a problem? Because nobody understands it. That's why it's a problem. When I was the chief executive of a $90 billion firm, I could at least hire the armies of accountants and lawyers and lobbyists necessary to make that 73,000 pages work for me. But the 9-person real estate firm can't, so we're crushing them. I bet you have a hell of a time filing your taxes every year. It gets harder and harder and harder. I'll tell you what Frank and I do, honestly. We hand our taxes off to an accountant. Thank goodness we can afford one. They come back. I close my eyes. I sign. I pray. I have no idea what I'm signing. 65% of the American people now need professional help to give the government their money. Why are we settling for this? All that complexity does what? It favors the big, the wealthy, the powerful. It crushes the small and the powerless. My dad, I mentioned to you that my dad was a law professor. You know what he taught? He taught tax law. And I adored my dad, but I would always say to him, Daddy, it's so boring. I mean, why are you teaching tax law? And I'll never forget, he would say over and over and over, I finally got it, Daddy, I finally got it. He would say, Carly, the tax code is how government uses power. That is right. The tax code is how government uses power, so we have to simplify the tax code. Go from 73,000 pages down to 3. Now, all the politicians tell me this can't be done. Actually, it can be. They're just not willing to get it done. There has been a plan for a 3-page tax code sitting around for 20 years. Nobody wants to talk about it, because guess how many oxes are going to get gored if you go from 73,000 pages down to 3? Guess how challenged the status quo is going to be when you start tearing apart all those interests? By the way, what happens when we go from 73,000 pages down to 3? We don't need as many IRS agents, do we? Not nearly as many. We can replace the IRS. You know how many IRS people we have today? More than we have CIA and FBI combined. Does that strike you as a problem? Yeah, it's a problem, which is why the next thing on the blueprint is we have to change how the government spends our money. Ask yourself this question: how is it possible that the government spends more money each and every year and never has enough money? So, you know the omnibus spending bill that just passed? Remember the omnibus? Just passed. A Republican-controlled Senate and House, although you wouldn't know it. That omnibus spending bill, we're spending more money once again. And we still don't have enough money. Every government agency has gotten more money every year for 50 years, and we never have enough money to do the important things. Secure the border, oh, we need more money. Serve our veterans, we need more money. Whatever it is, the government always says it needs more money. Why? Because all the money's spoken for. Because the way we have budgeted in government for 50 years is when you get your budget, you never give it back. You never have to explain it. You never have to justify it. Whatever we gave you, you hang on to that. And by the way, the next year all you do is put your hand out and say, I need more, please. And that's how we've been budgeting for 50 years. So we spend more money and we never have enough. It's why we have to go to zero-based budgeting. Fancy word, simple concept. All of you do zero-based budgeting. We all do. It's how you budget at home. It's how you budget in your businesses. I know it's how you budget in this restaurant. What it means, in brief, is every dollar gets examined. Any dollar can be cut. Any dollar can be moved. And that's the only way we're going to spend less money overall and still have enough money to spend on the important things. So when times get tough, here at Holy Smoke, and you look at every single dollar and you say, maybe we don't need as dramatic Christmas decorations this year. We're going to put that into paying the waitstaff. We don't do that in government. We need to. I'm going to skip over a couple of these, but you can ask me them in questions. We need to repeal Obamacare. We can talk about the alternative there. We need to stand up for the character of this nation and protect religious liberty and stand for life. We need to secure our border, finally, and enforce a pro-American immigration system. Ask yourself this. If you are doubtful as to whether my harsh critique of government and the political class is justified, ask yourself this. How long have we been talking about the border? 25 years, ladies and gentlemen. That's how long we've been talking about it. How long have we been talking about the immigration system? 25 years. San Francisco has been a sanctuary city since 1989, and we have 300 of them. Let us quit talking about this stuff and elect someone in the Oval Office who will actually get it done. Securing a border is not rocket science. It takes money, manpower, and technology, but mostly what it takes is a tested leader who's prepared to produce results. But I want to close on the last one, which is definitely not last or least. We have to defeat ISIS, and we have to lead again in the world. It is delusional and dangerous for Hillary Clinton to be speaking about gun control and climate change in the wake of Paris and San Bernardino. It is delusional and dangerous. We must defeat ISIS, which means we start by knowing who they are. They are at war with us. And no, we are not giving them any reason to kill us. It is their ideology that causes them to want to kill us. And so we need to have a plan to keep Americans safe here at home, which means we have to understand how incompetent the government has actually become. That's what happens to bureaucracies. Did you read the other day that the Department of Homeland Security missed these two San Bernardino killers because they never bothered to check their social media? These two killers had pledged allegiance to ISIS on a jihadi website years ago, but somehow DHS missed it because they don't check social media. For heaven's sakes, I checked out my granddaughter's new boyfriend on social media. I think the Department of Homeland Security can check out people who traffic on a jihadi website. And we need to deny them territory abroad in the Middle East because it is their territory that gives them power. I will close with this thought and take any questions you have. These are perilous and pivotal times. We need to remember who we are. Ours was intended to be a citizen government, and we need somebody now who can win this job and who can do this job. You know I can beat Hillary Clinton. And to take our country back and to keep our nation safe, we have to start by beating Hillary Clinton. But then ask yourself, what does it actually take to do this job the way it needs to be done, not to settle for another 4 or 8 years of more spending and less performance? What it takes is somebody who understands how the economy actually works. What it takes is a president who understands the world and how it works and who's in it, who knows and understands our military and our intelligence capabilities. She must understand bureaucracies because the government's a giant bloated bureaucracy that has to be cut down to size and held accountable. She must understand technology. Technology's a weapon, folks. It is a weapon that is being used against us. And while we should be winning this war, we are losing this war. But probably most importantly of all, our next president needs to understand what leadership is. Leadership is sometimes making a tough call in a tough time and standing up and being held accountable. So we cannot elect someone who has never made a tough decision or an executive decision in their lives. But the highest calling of leadership is to challenge the status quo, because it's only by challenging the status quo that you solve festering problems. So we can't elect somebody who's from inside the status quo, and we need to elect somebody who understands the highest calling of leadership is to unlock potential in others. We need a leader now who will work with the citizens of this great nation and finally take our country back. Thank you so very much, ladies and gentlemen. Yes, sir.
On the issue of illegal immigration, can you tell us specifics of how you would deal with that to include visa overstays and also...
All right, folks, it is coming up on 9 o'clock, which means we are going to sign off for the evening. But we will be back tomorrow. Samia will be back tomorrow to start off the day, and I will be back in the evening to bring it on for you guys right here on Fox 10 News Now. Hope everyone's having a great day.